Welcome back to DS Shovelware Scrounging, where I search through the DS's library in the hope of finding some hidden gems. I've been getting interested in Sudoku puzzles after I recently got this book called Murder Most Cryptic, which might sound like some murder mystery novel at first, but is actually a book full of puzzles with the murder mystery theme. I used to love puzzle books as a kid, so I decided to give this a shot. But as I began completing the puzzles, I soon came across the first Sudoku puzzle, and while I was able to complete it, I began to realize that I'm not that great at Sudoku puzzles. I never really was interested in them as a kid, and the only time I'd ever play Sudoku was on my first phone, which only had one free game available for me to play, Sudoku. I still have the song from the title screen etched into my mind somehow, despite never spending much time on it. I'd try it out for a few minutes, and then inevitably get bored and stop. But since it was the only free game I had, I would still open it occasionally, given there wasn't much else to do on these old phones. But now that I'm going through a puzzle book that's full of Sudoku puzzles, I guess I should try and get better at them. I've always known the basic rules, but I never learned the in-depth strategies, and I figured that I could learn that on the DS. One of my favorite DS games is Picross 3D, which is a game that taught me about Picross puzzles and how to complete them. I always loved this game as a kid, and I still go back to it every now and then to play it, as well as its sequel on the 3DS. This game really teaches you about Picross and even teaches some great strategies that have stuck with me since. So I was hoping I could do the same for Sudoku. You never know when you'll need to solve a Sudoku puzzle to save someone 9 years in the past, you know? There's actually a decent amount of Sudoku games for the DS, so let's start with the one I own 2 copies of, Sudoku Gridmaster. This was a part of the Touch Generation's line of games, where Nintendo tried to cater to the casual DS owners. They made games that were something anyone could pick up and enjoy, and some of these games did a pretty good job at that. Sudoku Gridmaster was one of these, since back then, having Sudoku on the go was a pretty big deal. I went through the tutorial, and it was alright, but I don't really feel like it taught me a lot I didn't already know. However, that doesn't mean this game wasn't helpful for me. One thing I really like about this game is the highlighting feature, which highlights the current square, row, and column you're in. This visualization helped make it a lot easier for me to see the information that was important. And when combined with being able to see all of the same number in a puzzle, I felt like it was easier for me to figure out what I had to do. On the first practice puzzle, I was able to solve it in 44 minutes. That's not very impressive. By this point, I hadn't done many Sudoku puzzles, so I wasn't too mad at myself over it. The next day, I tried the next practice puzzle and completed it in 27 minutes, which is a pretty big improvement. Completing these puzzles quicker is incentivized thanks to the stars you get at the end, so it made me want to improve and get faster. Overall, I think this game is a pretty good Sudoku game if you're looking for that. But I wanted to see if other games could help me improve my Sudoku skills, so I moved on to the next game, 50 Classic Games. This game obviously isn't just Sudoku, but it does feature Sudoku. I had picked this up a few weeks ago from a local game store with Clubhouse games still fresh on the mind, and this isn't as great as that was. I guess it's okay, but it just feels kind of bland. And I don't really know why, but just looking at the screen pisses me off. Maybe it's because there's no dark mode and staring at a white screen for a while makes my eyes want to die, but it's not anything too bad. It also has the highlighting I mentioned from Gridmaster, but it's not as helpful because the light blue doesn't do as good of a job as the yellow highlight did. It's certainly playable, but I just don't think it's really enjoyable. And with only 100 levels, it's not gonna last you very long. So, how about Sudoku Mania? With a name like that, this has gotta be something exciting. And I think this might be even worse. I really dislike this game for a lot of reasons. The fact that there's load times like this in a Sudoku game is crazy. and the themes feel kinda distracting and weird. The beach ones seemed the best to me, but this game has far more issues than just the theme. My biggest issue with this game is one that really ruins this for me. This game's Sudoku grid is put on the top screen rather than the bottom screen, and that's a big issue because it means you either use the D-pad or you use the touchscreen D-pad, which are way less intuitive than just using the touchscreen to select the cell. This game almost feels like it was meant to be a GBA game, and at the last second, they made it a DS game just to hop onto the DS bandwagon. If you have a touchscreen, then use it. I finished one puzzle, and that was all I needed to see that this game just isn't very good. I don't like to be super negative about a game because I feel like any game can have some redeeming qualities, but games like these just don't feel like they were made to be good. But I still wanted to improve my Sudoku skills, so I continued onwards to the next game, Toon Doku. This game is very strange and not very user-friendly. When I first tried this game, I didn't know how to actually play the game. I was put off by the colors and text immediately since it just hurt to look at. And then I have to select a character when I don't know what any of this means. Then it takes me to this screen where I can seemingly edit icons, but I can't actually save them because I have to beat bosses. I had no idea how to even play the actual game, but eventually I found the stage mode and was able to try out the first tutorial level, and wow, that's something. This game isn't actually Sudoku, but a variant called Simboku. Instead of numbers, this uses symbols, but it just makes things a lot more annoying. It's simple to see which numbers you're missing in normal Sudoku, but in Simboku, you have to consider if you're missing the sandwich, the soda, or the cherries. But I gave it a shot anyways, and it didn't impress me. As you've seen, the symbols don't look amazing when viewed from far away. However, what's even worse is that the controls are not very good. You have to drag symbols to the squares, which is really annoying given that they could have just let you select a square and click the symbol. It's also incredibly annoying to accidentally click a square and drag something into an empty square, which gives you a mistake at no fault of your own. I really tried to give this game a fair shot, but it just doesn't feel good to play at all. But just because Toon Doku isn't great, doesn't mean I dislike Simboku if it's done right. And this next game is a great example of this. Zendoku had me pretty skeptical at first, but it's a much better game. From the first menu, you get to pick between Zendoku and Classic Sudoku, and the Classic Sudoku is pretty nice. I would probably still prefer Gridmaster because the wide variety of colors just feels kind of strange to me, but the little effects and sounds are a nice touch. And guess what? You can use the touchscreen for it. Who would have guessed that was a good idea? There's multiple difficulties here, and you can even have the game solve it for you. It's not bad, but this isn't even the main game. Zendoku has a full story mode featuring different characters facing off against each other in battle, and it's actually not that bad. I thought I wouldn't really enjoy this because it's Simboku just like Toon Doku, but the animations are nice, the symbols are pretty distinct and easy to recognize, and the game still rewards you for being fast because this is basically a 1v1 duel in Simboku. When the opponent gets a row, column, or square filled, you get hit with a small minigame before you can regain control and continue solving the puzzle. I didn't play a ton of it, but from what I did play, I can confidently say I like it. Gridmaster gives you a more classic Sudoku game, but if you're looking for a bit more of a game, then this is certainly it. Next up is Ultimate Puzzle Games Sudoku Edition. Apparently they've made other games, such as the GBA game, which apparently won Game of the Year runner-up in 2005 for Best Puzzle Game. However, I feel that this game didn't get that same recognition. This game comes with several Sudoku modes, and they're okay. You have Sudoku Junior, which just features the numbers 1 through 4, Sudoku Mini, featuring 1 through 6, Sudoku 8, featuring 1 through 8, and Classic Sudoku, featuring 1 through 9. There's also a Sudoku solver, but I think it kinda defeats its own purpose, since you have to go into a whole separate mode to access it, when you probably want to use it for the Sudoku puzzles in the other modes. The one thing I do like about this game is that it visualizes the amount of each number at the top on this little graph, which I actually found to be pretty helpful at times. While this game wasn't the worst, it seemed far from the best. Now it's time for what might be one of the most popular Sudoku games on the DS, Brain Age. This is another Touch Generations title, and it's one of the more notable ones. I think most people, including myself, remember Brain Age because of the little mini-games and seeing how smart you were. But Brain Age also comes with Sudoku, and it's easily better than most of these other games. It's pretty simple, but given you still have the actual Brain Age game on the same cartridge, I can't hate it. While you do have to write the numbers instead of just touching them, the writing detection is pretty accurate and slick. I don't think this is perfect, but it's probably the best option for someone who wants Sudoku but also wants a real game with it. There's still a few games left I want to try, so I decided to give Platinum Sudoku a try. Ever since Gridmaster, my expectations had gradually been lowered, so I was expecting another trash game. I booted up the game and, okay, so I get to pick a coach. Obviously I'm taking her because this dude just seems boring compared to her. Before playing a puzzle, the game asks me if I want to play the tutorial, and I do. They even have an outfit for the coach in a lab coat, which I thought was a pretty nice touch. The coach goes through the basics of Sudoku and then has you complete the tutorial puzzle. And at the end, she checks if it's completed and... wow. I was not expecting that. But while it might seem like this coach is just horny bait, I did find myself liking the coach's role in this game. She can give you hints if needed, and she has a lot of unique dialogue surprisingly. It feels more high effort than these other games, and that's also thanks to the general gameplay. The writing detection is pretty good, even though I never used it much. I did find marking to be a little janky sometimes and somewhat unintuitive, but I got used to it over time. And remember how I mentioned the graph from Ultimate Puzzle Games Sudoku Edition? Well, this game has that same graph, but it just feels so much better to play. Another amazing thing about this game is the sheer amount of options it has, which I didn't even know about until the game told me as I kept playing puzzles. There's a mode where it just automatically marks for you, which does make it far more easier, but it's a great option for people who are newer to Sudoku or just want to relax and not think really hard. Another option allows you to see the easiest square to fill, which is a great way to give hints to people who need them. I did find these options to make the game pretty easy, but I'm still happy they're here regardless. There's also a lot of unlockables surprisingly. You can get extra music, extra backgrounds, challenges which can be a nice change of pace, and even extra tutorials. While there are more advanced tutorials, they're locked behind completing more puzzles. I'm not sure how many puzzles this is, but I think it sucks they aren't available from the start. But regardless, I found this game to really be a standout. This game has some real personality and has the most quality of life features out of any of these games. If I could only recommend one Sudoku game, it would easily be this one unless you care about the other modes in Brain Age and Zendoku. And the best thing is I didn't even mention that this game also comes with Kakaro, another type of puzzle that's a mix between crosswords and Sudoku. And the Kakaro mode is amazing too, since not only is it similar to the Sudoku mode, but it also lets you click on the triangle to see all of the possible sum combinations, which is incredibly helpful. There was clearly a lot of thought and passion put into this game, and it shows. It may not have that Nintendo level of polish, but it's a damn good Sudoku game if you want one. And Kokoro is a great bonus. And I think that idea of Sudoku and Kokoro in the same game ties nicely into our next game, Sudokuro. Wow, that's a way to start the game, I guess? Oh god, there's load screens again? I start with Sudoku and look at the options before starting my first puzzle. And wait a minute, these sounds, they're very familiar. And these controls, I've seen them before. Is this just Sudoku Mania all over again? And seemingly, it is. They're made by two different companies, but they're just too similar to not be the same game. I'd argue Sudokuro is worse though, because it is so hard to read the text, and the Kokoro feels as bad as Sudoku does. But hey, at least they have text recognition in this game. Why won't it let me write 5? Look at that 5. That was the perfect 5, and it made an 8. Are you serious? Okay, that's enough of that. Let's move on to our final game. And I decided to save the weirdest for last. Sudoku Ball Detective. I had no idea what to expect from this game, but it just sounded too interesting to not try. Right off the bat, we get a title screen with 3D graphics and multiple modes. I decided to go with the story mode first, and wow, this game has some interesting cutscenes. These characters look so bad. I honestly had no clue what I was even reading, so the only thing I pretty much understood from all of this is that this guy died and the detective is investigating it. This leads us into our first investigation and our first Sudoku ball. This just baffled me the first time I looked at it. What the hell am I looking at here? I didn't know what to do, how to control it, or anything. I think the best way I can describe this game is it's like the first time you play Super Mario Galaxy. When you go on the underside of a planet, you're so confused as to how the controls work, and sometimes you just walk off the side or run into an enemy. This pretty much felt the same way when I tried to control it, and it made it really difficult to comprehend what I was doing. This is basically a bunch of Sudoku grids all put together, and solving specific 3x3 squares will give you clues. It's pretty strange, but I can't entirely hate it. It feels weird to play, but it's something different. At least they let you move with the goddamn touchscreen, unlike some other games. There's also a few other modes, such as Classic Sudoku, which still uses the ball look on the bottom screen, but it felt better to play than some of the other games. There's also Classic Mode, which is a Sudoku ball puzzle similar to the story puzzles, and there's a few more types of puzzles in the Story Puzzle Select. There's a lock-picking puzzle where you have to solve the numbers in the middle to pick the lock, a suspect chase where you have to quickly solve squares to catch up to the suspect, and the laboratory puzzle, where you have to solve Sudoku grids while it occasionally removes some numbers after a certain amount of time. These aren't anything amazing, but they're not bad, at least. This game is pretty weird, and can be a bit confusing, but I did enjoy the time I spent with it. And towards the end, I felt like I was solving Sudoku puzzles at a decent pace. The only bad thing I can say about this game is the flashing locations on the world map, which seemed like a bug at first, but it's actually intentional, and I honestly felt the need to censor it because if it's bothering me, then it's probably even worse for people with epilepsy. And that pretty much wraps up the Sudoku games I played. If I were to make a tier list of these games, it'd probably look something like this. I had quite a few games I enjoyed here, and I think I can safely say that these games did help me get better at Sudoku. But the unfortunate reality of these games is that they're just products of a bygone era. Nowadays, you can just download a free Sudoku app on your phone that will likely be as good, if not better, than these games. You don't have to deal with janky controls, and it's always right there in your pocket if you need it. But I think that these DS games can often go unappreciated in the age of the modern smartphone. I put far too many hours into the copy of Crosswords DS that I picked up for really cheap years ago, despite the fact I could easily just download some crossword puzzle app on my phone. There's just something about playing on a DS that makes it feel more fun. And not having to deal with annoying ads is also a great bonus. While they may not be the most convenient way to portably play Sudoku anymore, some of them are still worth your time if you're willing to give them a shot. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.